Okay, hello again from the back. I'm going to start the presentation. So right now in front of you, it's a street view picture that I took. It is last December in Chengdu, China. This area is one of the most busiest downtown area in the city with lots of shopping malls, restaurants, artistic centers. So it's really busy, and that's just a view. Let's get started. So first, I'd like to start with where is Chengdu? So as you see the highlight on this map, Chengdu is the capital city of Sichuan province. It is in the more southern and also western part of China. It is also in a basin, which means it's mostly below the ground level, and it is nowhere near the sea or river. They have small river, but it's nowhere near the ocean. So Chengdu is actually, fun fact, it's not where I or my family originally from in China. It's actually a 3-hour flight from our city Nanjing, which is more on the border and southern part. So here are just some fun facts about Chengdu. So the background is a night view of the street. It's very bright and starry night during the evening, very beautiful. So as I said, Chengdu is the capital city of the province Sichuan. It is not the biggest city in China or one of the largest, because my city is supposed to be larger, I believe. But it is actually a super center with a little bit over 20 million people. So that's a lot, and about 10 times more than Toronto population. It is the fourth most populous city in China. And economic wise, it's also ranked very much in the front. It does have a nickname called the Heavenly Land of Plenty. It has a very diverse economy characterized by machinery, automobile, medicine, food, and information technology industries. For information technology like IT, Chengdu recently developed new centers at its original suburbs. So it's actually a rising superpower as a city in China. I believe economically it can be ranked at probably the sixth or seventh city in China, which is rising up really high and catching up to where I am from, really. And it is a new leading financial hub and ranked about the 35th globally in the 2021 Global Financial Centers Index. So these are just some statistics, and then we're going to move into some interesting facts about the city that's not so formal. So on this screen, you can see a lot of pictures that I took and some pictures from the internet. So one of the most standing out trait about the city, it's its spiciness, because the food that's most typical and popular in the region would be spicy hot pot or spicy dry pot. So Chengdu is famous for being the home of giant pandas, as some of you might have already known. So panda is also the spiritual animal of China, and it is Sichuan, and Chengdu is where it is from. Here is a picture of a toy panda that I took a picture of, and I also see a lot of real ones on my trip. And spicy food is the spirit of the Chengdunese lifestyle, which is very true because each meal that I had in the city was very spicy. China's largest building is located in Chengdu. So if you take a look at the bottom left, it is a very big sports center. And I searched on the internet because I didn't know at the time, but it seemed to be one of the biggest buildings with the ground area. Not compared to like the Palace Museum or something, I believe, as like commercial buildings and stuff. And then Chengdunese people speak a local dialect that is very fun to listen to, but very difficult to understand. So yeah, there are many different types of dialect in Sichuan province, and Chengdunese people definitely speak a very typical one. It's really fast with interesting pitch and sounds. I couldn't really understand any of them. Sichuan opera is a very exciting and classical form of Chinese art to experience. Unfortunately, I didn't end up having any opportunity to watch one, but it's apparently really, really famous in the country. The biggest stone-carved Buddha in the world is only 2 hours away from Chengdu. So that's called something called Leshan Buddha, which the city is just about 2 hours, and a lot of worldwide visitors just go to see that. I didn't, because later I will tell you about this exciting trip that I have been working on an earthquake-related project on the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake survivors in China. Most of them were high school students at the time and now in their early 30s. So my trip was not only for tourism purposes, I was doing field studies and or history interviews or casual visits because I also have personal relationship with the earthquake survivors. So my trip is to go to each city that they now live in and to hang out with them and talk a bit about their life and their experience. So that's sort of the main purpose of this trip. That's also why I didn't go to a lot of more touristy places, but get more of a touch with the local lifestyle and experience. So here's some information on when did I go to Chengdu. So I spent about 10 days between December the 11th and 19th last year during Christmas. So I spent in total 5 days in Chengdu, 2 days in Mianzhu, which is a city 2 hours from Chengdu, and also where the earthquake essentially originated as one of the epicenters, not the epicenter, but one of the most disastrous zone. Another day I stayed in Yibing, which is an hour from Chengdu, and one of the earthquake survivor families currently live there, find jobs there. The other is one day in Mianyang, which is a city 2 hours from Chengdu and 1 hour from Mianzhu. Those cities were just neighbors close to each other, adjacent to each other, and it's also one of the most disastrous zones in the earthquake. So then I'm gonna have some questions about would I recommend to go in winter? This is a tough question. My first time went there is in the summer and it was 2011. So I would say going in the winter and in the summer, definitely gonna give you very different experience. Winter, China, and specifically Chengdu is nowhere to be as cold as Saskatchewan. It's hardly below 0 degrees. However, China has a dry type of coldness, a humid type of coldness in comparison to the dry coldness in here. So you could feel like the temperature is colder than reported here in some ways. So I would not suggest in going to January or February just to avoid the humid coldness if you're not a fan of that. But if you go somewhere in November and December, it would be a good time because the fall in China is much longer. And actually, you could see from some of my later pictures that in the early December or mid-December, it's still fall in there. So it feels like you can see something similar to the maple leaves, and it's the tail of the fall. And then what would be the most ideal time frame to stay there? I already answered that. I think summer would be fun and late fall would also be really beautiful because of the leaves and then the street view. And it's also cooler. So it really depends on what you're looking for. I think except for February type of winter, anywhere else should be good. Then here is some logistics or feasible aspect of traveling there. So I did take a look at some of the flight tickets because I didn't do much research before. So apparently fly from Toronto or Montreal, it's about $2,000 if you fly economy. And of course that ticket price would fluctuate. And from Vancouver, since it's a closer flight, about 8 hours, so it would be a bit cheaper, about 1,500 to 1,700. The tips would be it's easier to find direct flights to Beijing or Shanghai as two of the biggest city in China. They have more straight and direct flights. And then if you stay there, travel for 3 days or so and book a transit flight to Chengdu, it's probably be the most cost-effective option. And then the flight from Toronto or Montreal to Beijing or Shanghai or Chengdu, I would suggest it's about 14 hours and a half with no transit in between. And that's normally the routes that I take. Okay, so now let's dive into some of the fun places and destinations I went and some of the cool people that I meet. So I'm gonna start with the first day. I began my morning with my friend Laura. Laura is my elementary school friend who is a singer, composer, and also a master's student. So she began the day by taking me to the busiest center in the city. It's called Chunxi Road. And on Chunxi Road, there is a lot of shopping malls, but because she is more of a book nerd and a bookworm, so she brought me to a very niche bookstore called Fangguo. Here is some pictures of Laura in the bookstore, and also one of the interesting pictures on the right side is a panda, sculpture of a panda on the facade of a shopping mall, which I believe was built in the early 2010s and since then become a very scenic view of there. So here is more of an isolated picture of Laura against the shopping mall. So this is actually very busy part of the city and incredibly beautiful. You could see that in about December the 11th, December the 10th, the city still looked very much like the autumn, with the leaves mostly still stick to the branches. And against that was a lot of shopping centers like Dior, Louis Vuitton, YSL, so a lot of fun places. And on the other side were some other stores, bookstores. Laura did try to dress up very like a Japanese character, more anime-like for that trip. This is the bookstore that she took me to. We were waiting to meet with her friend, and then we spent the whole morning there trying to buy some books for our friends. One of the really interesting fun facts that I noticed about the bookstore is they sell a lot of panda toys, which is nowhere else I see in China because each city has its different animals, except for in the airports. Everywhere probably sells some sort of panda, but it's very striking to see the first view. We see there is different sizes of pandas as the spiritual animals, which is very fun. And here is a more complete bird's view of the bookstore. I would definitely say it's one of the most artistic and for very like energetic artsy arts and cultural type of groups. It's not really a typical layout of a bookstore, but the books were grouped in more innovative ways with novel groups, arts. It's not like traditional shelves where you find a lot of stuff. They were piled and you can basically find anything you want. And this bookstore with interesting lighting in the ground level of a very huge shopping mall connected to a lot of subways. And it also is not only a bookstore, but also a place you can drink coffee, buy some sandwiches, and also buy a lot of arts and crafts stuff like notebooks, notepads, postal cards, and some like crafts stuff like similar stuff to what we have in the books in the gift shop, but not very exactly the same. So it's really interesting to explore there. And here is a more enlarged picture of the panda, which is the famous panda that becomes sort of a symbol of the city. This is a street view because after we went out from the bookstore, we just wandering around. The first 3 days we stay in a hotel that's downtown. Yeah, so every morning we walk about 15 minutes to the subway. In Chengdu, the subway is very convenient for anyone to take. It can basically bring you anywhere. So if we are not in super of a rush, we won't call a cab, we will take the subway. And taking subways, no matter which city you go to, it's always a really, really great way to explore the city, see the locals, hear the dialect. So it's just really fun. Every morning, this path become very familiar to us. It brings us from the hotel we live, which is also downtown, to the city center. And a lot of the views were very, very fall-like. So it feels like a late October in Canada, but it's actually December in China. This is the first day lunch, which is ramen. So we met with Laura's lawyer friend who works at a local lawyer firm. So she recommended to us, despite Sichuan Chengdu was famous for its spicy pot and hot pot. I think because she's a local, she is not as craving for the spiciness as travelers. So she brought us to actually a Japanese restaurant with incredibly good ramen. And that's just a picture. Okay, so here comes the very exciting part. So later that day, we went to a home to a Taoist missionary. So, and he is sort of a missionary, a Taoist cultural practitioner, and also sort of a fortune teller. So this person is a survivor of the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake. He was an amputee. His right leg was amputated from the thigh. He was rescued from debris after, I believe, 50-something hours. So I became a friend with him, and I became a personal friend and also researcher of the entire earthquake survivor community. And I have actually a very over a decade type of friendship with him. So it's always really excited to see what he is doing. He tried a lot of different type of jobs, from like working with financial groups to artistic career. He did painting for a little while. And those type of things didn't work out for him. So then he founded his own like cultural practice studio where he practiced as a missionary to do a lot of interesting, mysterious practices. Of course, it's sort of have a lot of, like debates for what he does, and it's also controversial, but I just always feel fascinated about visiting this studio and this workspace with a lot of like symbols and elements and practice from traditional culture, and that's a picture. Then after he served us tea and talked a little bit about his work with his clients, he brought us to a panda zoo. So I actually went to the panda zoo with the missionary's family. Went to a panda zoo. This panda zoo was very famous in the city. They rescued a lot of panda, and then the panda started to have more baby pandas, and then they become like internet celebrities. So I went with the missionary family. And then the picture on the very far left is his daughter. His daughter is 5 years old. And then she just keeps wondering, everything that I wear seems to be very interesting and curious for her. She just keeps wanting to have my necklace, my ring, and stuff like that. The trip to the panda zoo was actually very challenging for the missionary because of his amputation. He wears a prosthetic, and I was actually very surprised that he made that commitment to travel to the zoo with me and climb all the staircases. So that was actually very eye-opening. And then after the panda zoo, I went to a traditional hot pot meal with his family. So because they know that I'm not from an area that can really eat very spicy stuff, so they ordered something which meets me in the middle ground. So it's actually something that's not quite spicy, but also gave me the just taste of it. Okay, so during my second day, I went to Coca-Cola World Museum, which is also a very famous place in the city. So the original museum of Coca-Cola is in Atlanta, America, and I went in 2022. But this is about the third museum in worldwide wise, and it's very exciting. My friend, actually, his name is Parker, and he worked as the museum manager in there. So yeah, it was the first time that I actually went to his workplace after hearing about it and watching it on news for a couple of years. He was the famous Coke boy rescued after 80 hours under debris for the Wenchuan earthquake. And he was also a public figure in China and my only celebrity friend. The picture on the very far, on the top left is a picture of me and my friend Laura waiting in front of the front entrance of his workplace. His museum has a factory, museum combined with factory. They're together as an entity. So they have very strict rules for visitors. You definitely have to book appointments and pay a fee, and they sort of need to admit you on a one-by-one case. But Parker just let us in. We stayed there and called him. And then the bottom two pictures were their museum gift shop and some stuff that they sell there. Oh yeah, so this is a picture, sorry. So this is a picture of me and Laura waiting. On the red board, it says safety regulations for people who enter the factory and museum. So it's actually make it look really serious. So when we were waiting for Parker, he was actually in a meeting. And because he was in the meeting, we have to wander around for about 15 minutes. That's where we walk into a shopping mall against the building. And it's really interesting because this is for people to post their information, and there is going to be so men and women who are single post their information there, and they can see and glance at each other's information and hook up, connect with the other person. We find it really interesting and hilarious for people to just list their names and salaries and where they work and where they're from, type of information straight up there. So it feels very odd but fun. This is a picture of the museum. They sell and collect all type of Coca-Cola bottles since the early 19th century, early 20th century, late 19th century, I believe, around the 1880s or something. So they have a lot of diverse different type of things. And my friend Parker gave me some of the special bottles called the panda bottles that is not for sale yet at that time for us to bring home. It was very heavy. This is a picture of Parker presenting for one of the sports events, very huge in 2023. It was playing on the loop for one of the videos in the museum. This is a picture of Laura wandering around the museum. Parker was giving us a tour, but it was interrupted by some government officials that showed up unexpectedly to supervise his work. The workplace dynamics in China was quite different, and the level between different staff and different layers were very strict. It was very shocking to see how much respect he needs to give to the government officials, but it was eye-opening. This is also a Chengdu museum, which is the biggest city museum that we went during the second day. So actually Chengdu and the another museum very close by, it's called Sanxingdui. It's very famous, and then they reported something controversial about finding like masks that are suspected to belong to the aliens. There were a lot of historical theories and debates on those type of masks. And this is some mask that's quite similar to that, which is on the second image on this screen would be something that's quite similar presented at that museum too. Yeah, Chengdu was also the city with the original tales and myths of the aliens, and a lot of the masks were from thousands of years ago. It's very shocking to see how much like craftsmanship and innovation that they can put in there. And then that day we also wander around in an older part of the city. So this older aesthetic, it's not only just the filters we use, but it's quite of a presentation of the more nostalgia and aesthetics of that part of the city. It's kind of very much a revival of the 80s. And that day for dinner, I actually had dinner with earthquake survivor friends. In the middle is my museum manager friend, Parker, from the Coca-Cola Museum, and also an earthquake survivor. On the right is Becca Chin, who was Parker's friend, who was rescued along with him in the earthquake, and also an amputee. So yeah, so that day I had dinner with their colleagues and also with these friends that I haven't seen for 13 years. It was very, very fun. And another picture with us, on day 3, I visited a law firm with Laura, obviously meeting her loyal friend for the second time. She was working as a practicing lawyer. I believe she just transitioned from an intern to an official like practicing lawyer. It was really shocking to see how beautiful like the lobby, the place of her workplace is. But actually, when you go to the inside, you could see everyone just walks at a very, very tiny desk. And then they have to work from like anytime. They have to be on call like 24/7. And every day they have to work extra hours like without pay. And the stress was scary and incredible at that place. So it was really shocking to see how the like my peers in China work, their lifestyle and how they work in comparison to how the young people and younger generation have in Canada. It was actually quite scary and made me wonder if that's something I can ever handle after visiting the law firm. But obviously, that's a job envied by so many in China, and the profile or the outside of her life would be pretty much like a dream for a lot of people this age. So here comes to my day 3. We started it with another city walk with all these leaves, very yellowish and goldish. You could see it is quite much fall-like in China at the time. And there is also the area looks like ancient China, or at least revoke that. So for this day, you reunited with another earthquake survivor friend named Sasha. Sasha didn't acquire any disabilities in the earthquake, but the impact was also very prolonged. And then during the dinner, I also met with her current husband, and we talked a little bit about her experiences and the places she walked. She currently practiced as an artist and designer in a local firm. Sasha and her husband took me to a more far place in the city to have some traditional food. And this is just a view of how busy and how bright the city can be during the nighttime. Where they brought me was actually really interesting. This is a veggie hot pot. So everything we have was like veggie based with the pancakes, with mushrooms, with interesting like leaves. But they taste really, really fresh and they taste really good. It's definitely one of the most interesting meal I've ever had. Day number 4, I started with a photo shot. I booked it very early in advance. I find it would be interesting to leave some photos for every place that I visit. So I booked it with a local studio to just have some random shots, and it actually was very fun. So they have a lot of different type of sets. It's actually a real motorcycle and interesting lights. So this place does allow you to take pictures with whatever setting, which was very fun. And this is, I try to fit into a Chinese cheongsam, but because as the Chinese people are very tiny in size and body shape, I actually couldn't even fit into their large. So I eventually fit into my own dress, but it tried to evoke sort of that shape. And that's the photo studio. Against a mirror, it's a very interesting artsy place. That night, the lawyer friend of Laura took us to a one-star Michelin restaurant. I believe many years ago, Canada wasn't introducing the Michelin star restaurant and China wasn't. But for Canada, both Canada and China, this concept was quite recent. But this restaurant received a one star just not far ago. So it was actually really, really good and definitely one of the really good and delicate cuisine place that I visit on the trip. Here is a picture of the food we had with the pancakes with cornflakes, with shrimps, it was interesting sauce, and also the Peking duck, but cooked more in a Sichuanese way. So they are actually really good. They have very small portion compared to a normal standard restaurant, but they taste more refined. This is a traditional Sichuanese dish with barbecue and it is very spicy and oily, but really good. And this is a pork bone soup, Chinese version rather than Korean version. And then after that Michelin meal, we went for another night walk in Chengdu. This is just a representation of how Chengdu does look like at night. It's very, very bright and everything is lit up by stereo lights. This is just the city center, how it looks like in the early winter. And this is also a busy part close to the subway. Laura told me if you pay $5,000, you can project anything that you want to project on one of the building facade. And while we wander, we went to a Chinese temple. This is a Chinese temple, but it hosts exhibitions inside. I believe we walked into a Louis Vuitton show, which is very interesting with like the temple facade on the outside, on the exterior, and bag exhibitions on the inside. Then after that night walk, we went to an anime center in a shopping mall. The whole building was dedicated to Japanese anime. And then because they're all like anime watchers and I am not, I'm very much live within real life. So I was just watching for them shopping. On day 5, it was actually really exciting and different for me because this is the time that I actually visit the destruction site of the earthquake, very close to the epicenter. It is in a city called Mianzhu, very close, 2 hours from Chengdu. And I visit a lot of memorials as well as the abandoned ghost town after the earthquake. And here's just some images of that. We took a very early train in the morning, about 6 a.m., and this is Laura and me wandering in that Chinese train station. Chinese train stations are very huge. And then that's where we get off. It's actually still 40 minutes to 50 minutes away from the epicenter, but our friend locally come to pick us. He used to be a student of Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and I met him during my master program. I was very surprised to find that he was also a survivor of the earthquake, although younger than my other survivor friends, but from the same city, and we bonded really quickly. Now he returned to where he was from, or very close to where he was from, and find a very interesting job. My friend just got a new car, and this is me on the pilot driver seat on his car. He picked us up and bring us to an interesting place to have Chinese rice noodles. I believe it's a beef ball, and it's very spicy. This is quite cool because this is the place that he worked. He worked at a Chinese planet. It's for innovating new chemical products and also really much belongs to the national security level. So regular people can't enter. And he keeps asking me 3 times if I have Canadian citizenship, because Canadians and non-Chinese citizens will not be even allowed to enter this area. It's on the top of a mountain, which is isolated from the like normal lay people, like it was separated from the normal population. Only scientists and people who carry securities can enter. And then after showing me to his super prestigious workplace, he took me to his high school. And this is a picture of his high school. I don't really understand the connections or why. Here is just a short video of what it's look like to ride on Chinese highway. Okay, all right. So this is also, this is like so he drove us off the highway and we entered the actual destruction center of the earthquake. Then we hoop onto a very small car. It was changed to a car from a motorcycle, and it took us onto the mountain to see where the earthquake victims were buried and how the scale of the destruction that we can see along the road. So this is actually a very dangerous road. The government won't even allow people to travel there because it's very crumbling, but there are still local people who take researchers and visitors who are interested in earthquake history to climb up and see stuff. It was very shocking in person to see the destroyed and demolished buildings along the road. Many of them still have victims underneath. Um, So these were the ghost town that I mentioned about. And a lot of the survivors who I have dinner and lunch with and share time with on this trip, they all from this town. They used to live here, but after the earthquake, their home was demolished, and then they have to abandon the city and move and relocate to other sites nearby. And these places, after 16 years, were covered by trees, plants, vegetations, and it's very hard to picture how it was, but it used to be where all my friends live. So after that very heavy and emotionally torn trip, my friend and his family from Queen's University and now live there invited me to a very authentic and spicy local food. In the afternoon, he took me around the town and we were just looking around. So this is not a city. It has a huge contrast to Chengdu, China, because it's a very small town and it still have that 70s or 80s feel. We are still on his car and to visit this township. This is just a new town built beside the destruction site, which the local people call the new town. Some of the architecture were preserved or kept from the earthquake, but a lot of them were new builds. It's interesting to see architecture in this place because just half an hour from this center, buildings look exactly the same were destroyed and demolished, but some of these buildings are still standing. The whole place looked like 30 years behind Chengdu in general. He used a lot of technology to drive. His car was very new. And then for dinner, he invited his elder brother to treat us to hot pot. So here's a picture of Laura and my friend and his brother. He brought me to the most spicy food of my entire trip. This is the most spicy food I've ever experienced, and the only one time I experienced authentic local food. It's a spicy pot. On day number 6, my friend took me to see a fortune teller. This fortune teller was very famous locally and worked there for many decades, like 6 decades. He is very different from my survivor friend who practiced a very similar business. But this definitely feels more like older and authentic and historical. He resides in the countryside, so we had a very hard drive there. And then the whole place looks like a different universe. This is a view of me wandering there. He has a huge chain of clients, so we had to wait for over an hour and a half. This is an image of me and my friend being brought to a very small room. The fortune teller was smoking and just using my name, the time of my birth, and some information to map out my life. It was actually very, very surprising and fun. And I feel like he does say a lot of things accurately for things that's already happened. So that's really shocking and fascinating. Uh, this is a very interesting dry pots that my friends brought me in a local cultural center. It's braised chicken with pancakes. And during the nighttime of that day, I gave my friend a birthday surprise. It was his 27th birthday. So we got him a cake and we did plan this party. He was very surprised. Then he drove us to our hotel. This is a very pretty much we returned to the city, or it is sort of a city in between a city and a town in China, but it's very lively. It's not the same as where we visit as the earthquake site. And on day 7, I visit a city called Yibing, which is one of my other earthquake survivor friend moved to. They picked me up and this is their car, drive me around the city. This is my earthquake survivor friend who was a boy, and that's his wife in the middle, and that's the city skyscape. Their city was a city, but it's a third tier city in China, so it does have both the city and small town vibe interestingly integrated into each other. My friend works as a supervisor on a construction site. So that's where he brought us to see his workplace. It was very scary and interesting to see him in helmets and see that different aspect of his life. That's the local food he invited us to. Despite them looking very spicy, they weren't that spicy. And this is a city of the picture of their city. Their city was on a river and it's everywhere is water and fish. This is a video of them bringing me to most photoscenic place in their city. It's on a mountain. And I was just enjoying walking around with them. They brought me to a closed township nearby. So it was a lot of presenting a lot of cultural, a lot of history of the Republic in China and temples for sure, mostly about the Sino-Japanese war history and how the Chinese army reside and keep moving to a war to avoid the conflict. And this is a sort of commercialized township, but still kept a lot of essence of the authenticity. And my friend was being very welcoming, and he brought a lot of local food for us. He carried all of them in his hands, and we were walking past by a very huge field. And that's the dinner he brought us to. It's quite similar to the veggie pot my other friend brought me to, except for this one has a lot of meat, which is very good. And it's on like a stone pot with fire with coal, so it's very like traditional. This is the most beautiful night view I've ever seen in my lifetime. I was just been to Boston 3 months ago, but I think this whole night was just on another level. It's so bright, and all the color was mashed into that evening. Everything looks like purple rainbow. My phone doesn't really capture the golden and purple lights of that night, but everything in that city was lit up. And it's an ancient city with a lot of temples and palaces and dragon boats. So it's really exciting. And everything on that mountain was lit up too. My friend brought me with a noodle bowl. He said I don't have to finish it, but it's something he has every morning. And then the last day, we are very close to the end. The last day is we return to Chengdu, so go back to the hotel. That's the dining hall of that hotel. The hotel is sort of a combination of modern and very niche. We have an interesting room with interesting lights and sound that we can control. And the washroom, it's like also everywhere has lights. And then we spend the rest of the day shopping at the ICF, which is the building I showed at the very beginning. That day, we have a dinner with another survivor friend and his family. My friend was a double amputee, so we picked a wheelchair accessible place. And then we also went to a book cafe. Everyone was able to leave some notes and stuff they write and hand it to the wall, and you can also read stuff other people write. The bookstore is very different and interesting because they make these huge curtains with pages taken from each book, and it creates that really dreamy vibe. That's the night walk we had close to a temple part of that city. And then we went home. Okay, so I'm gonna do some very quick tips about things you could do to navigating Chengdu if you travel there. The first thing is do your research because the city is really, really big. You really need to look into how many days you have and choose the places that you want to go and map close sites together. And the city, because the city is so huge, it has different centers and places customized to different groups of people. So knowing what you're looking for shopping, if you want to buy something like traditionally Chinese, if you are like more niche into more niche stuff like fashionista stuff, it's really about to do the research before going. Unfortunately, my friend Laura did that research for me. Then it's to find a hotel situated in a good location. So we stayed at two hotels on the way. The first one is downtown. The second one is in the information technology area, the new area of the city. Something to note about Chinese cities is that because the population is growing at a very incredibly rate, so that every city needs to expand. So it's the downtown of a lot of cities like mine or Chengdu, the downtown is the old downtown. And then they're having the newer and more technological downtowns at the suburbs. So the second hotel we pick is situating in one of those tech areas. It's not going to be any less busy than the downtown, and it's going to have sort of being a center of young people and people who go for the exciting lifestyle. So yeah, that's sort of the views again of that hotel. And the hotel also have incredibly dim sum breakfast. And then the sort of the final thing is about finding local people to travel with you help a lot. I know a lot of you probably don't have connections there, but it's pretty of a common practice to post online, to make posts on the forums or online websites. And a lot of people who wants to, for example, have language exchanges or make new connections would respond to them and be local guide. Yeah, and then be adventurous with food. Here is just a very sneak peek of all the exciting foods that I haven't shared on this trip, and all of them are really amazing.